Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. The thing that we've loved since we started these Five Clubs conversations over 4 years ago was the idea that, you know what, just flip the light on and let's go. And we'll end whenever we end. And something like this, a book like this, The Golf 100, trying to determine, let alone to be able to put this all into a book form, who are the greatest 100 players of all time? Oh, you're damn right it's a spirited debate. And when you get down to Jack or Tiger, which is inevitably where we go, then it can get really fun. Michael Arkush wrote this book, and it's about examining the greatest players, not just of the modern era, and oh, by the way, not just men, being nuanced and being pragmatic about it, and including women in this to shine a light on the likes of Annika Sorenstam and Kathy Whitworth and Lorena Ochoa and Mickey Wright. And of course, it's guys like me who get bogged down in the 50s, like how in the hell do you have Lanny Wadkins ahead of guys like Payne Stewart or Hale Irwin or Nick Price? Debates, who's better? It's why we dopey guys do what we do. We make lists. Well, this is a pretty definitive list. And the author himself, Michael Arkush, on Golf's 100. It's next on this Five Clubs conversation.
When your hands are consistent, your game can go anywhere. Align Max, our newest raised ridge technology designed to keep you and your game locked in on every shot. Only from Golf Pride. Respect the grip.
And with that, we welcome in the author himself, the Golf 100. This is why we do this stuff. Guys love lists. Michael Arkush, he wrote the book. Good morning. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for doing this. You did this, and now this right here is a gift for people who go, no, there's no reason why he should be in the 40s. He should be in the 20s. There's a fun little anecdote at the beginning of the book, Michael, about you sharing the fact that you were going to try to do that. I think it was Jim Furyk. And he's like, yeah,
yes.
Good luck with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us kind of where it started to germinate in your mind that, yeah, I want to do this book.
Well, I think I just reflected back to all the people I covered when I was working at Golf World, and I wanted to check in with them. And Gary, I also kept reading these obituaries online at different times about players who I'd followed or knew, and felt like, I don't know, it was too brief a summation of their lives. I wanted to dive deeper. I felt that they weren't getting quite the attention they deserved. We put it online for a while, and then it disappears. And I thought, who are they? What makes these players great? What makes them flawed? So I wanted to do my own investigation.
And you did, and I will say this for all the viewers. Anytime you go through lists, that creates, dialogue and debate, and all of that is fun. It's kind of what we do as fans of sports and specific sports. But what I would say to the viewer is if you want to know, really know about these players, these capsules, it's not just a list. It is a great biographical examination on lives beyond just what they did and how they got there. So that is the other part of it. It's like this is a wonderful history book on players who you'd say, well, they shouldn't be in it, or he should be higher, or she should be higher. And let's get to that right there, the he or she. The choice to do men and women in a collective 100, did you battle yourself on whether to try to take this on, just knowing that a women's list and a men's list can be a difficult thing to do?
I did battle myself. I thought, how do you really compare them? Because they played in different tournaments against obviously different opponents. And you could argue that how can this woman player be better than this male player who's lower on the list? But I kept coming back to the fact that women have been marginalized enough in society and in sports, and I didn't want to relegate them to some other list. These women form some of the greatest players in the history of the game, and they should be recognized for that. So what I decided to do and we can go into the numbers later, but I decided to compare their numerical totals that I came up with versus each other, not versus the men. Now, where to put them in the whole list, that was very difficult. I just decided in my experience as a golf writer to sort of just think of how they factor in and just decide this is where they belong. There's no science to that part of the equation.
You just mentioned about numerical stuff and data. You did utilize that in terms of the weightiness of accomplishment. Explain to people how you kind of had a baseline based on certain things that each player had achieved, which gave them, kind of a quantitative baseline starting point.
Well, it all comes down to major championships.
Yep.
So 2,000 points for every major victory, 500 for second, 250 for third, 100 for fourth, and 50 for fifth, and then 300 for every regular tour victory. I didn't give someone points for shooting a 65 in the final round to squeak into fourth place at a tournament. No, it had to be a victory on the PGA Tour, and it had to be a top 5 finish on the major tour. I think that for all of us, really, again, major championships define greatness in golf. That's when we all sit around and talk about who is at the top of the game by what they've done in those tournaments. I also, however, came up with bonus points because there are players who, for one reason or another, left the game early. Some voluntarily, others because of fate. Tony Lema, Payne Stewart, others. So there were bonus points to what I estimated they would have accomplished if they hadn't left the game early. So there's a combination of the metrics and the bonus points.
It's interesting. I found myself in reading the book thinking I'm probably going to challenge you most on some names in the middle of the list. But that is the beauty of something like this, is that you could get wrapped up in players that are in the 90s that you think should be in the top 50s as opposed to 1 through 5, and we're going to get to all of it. But I found it, and I'm going to use this word because I don't know. I just think it's appropriate. I think it's sweet that you started with Johnny McDermott as number 100, and Michael, your first line was, "Oh, why are you doing that?" Like you're bringing up the fact that this is somebody who had a very challenging life. In the end, why did you choose to begin with him?
Well, I think he is so forgotten. I mean, it's amazing how many people I've talked to who have no idea who he was, and yet he remains at age 19 the youngest U.S. Open champion ever, 2-time champion. And then the tragedy that unfolded for him, losses in the stock market and a lot of mental issues. He spent a great deal of his life in a psychiatric hospital. I think it just sort of illustrates that nothing is given in this game or in life, and that early fame can go in different ways. And he's such a fascinating figure. I just want to share one story toward the end of his life, that in 1971, he's at the U.S. Open in Marion. He's this disheveled elderly man who's in the pro shop, and an assistant pro has no idea who he is, and he starts to kind of push him out the door. And at that very moment, who walks in but Arnold Palmer? And Arnold recognizes who John is, and he's Arnold's guest for the rest of the week at the Open. I just was so moved when I heard that story.
And that story is in this book, which again speaks to what I'm saying, is that it's not just here's what they did. No, it's these moments that are part of what made up their lives, even beyond, in his case, his playing career. I'm glad that you included that. That, again, is the jumping off point at player number 100. It's also, Michael, as I read this, and I'm seeing players who are competing now, Jordan Spieth in this list, and it immediately made me think, okay, where would Michael right now, because again, you wrote it when you wrote it, where do you put Scheffler right now? If you got Spieth in this book, Michael, I know you've thought about this. Where is Scottie Scheffler right now?
I haven't done the numbers since the PGA, okay? But he certainly had risen. He certainly, first of all, he's not in the book as is, but he certainly would be in there now. Probably in the 70s, 60s, who knows? And it was really tough because, Gary, at the British Open of last year was the last tournament I counted toward the final totals. And Scottie was one of a number of players that if he were to win that week, he would join the list. And so I'm scrambling because my deadline for the book is basically a week away. So I would have had to compile I even sort of started a chapter on Scottie just in case he won. So it's fair to say that I was gratified in the sense that none of the guys I had on the list made it because of their performance in the British Open.
Yeah, it's and again, that's what's fun about it is that it's what it is at the time that you choose to write it. So it gets me to the next guy because it was the end of the last major of 2024. The first major of 2025 alters your list. So I just wonder, with respect to Rory, who's 25th in the book, which is interesting because, again, I'm looking at Rory, and the immediate question, Michael, as you know, is he now the greatest European player of all time? If you want to start looking at where he is all time amongst all players, that's fine. But you have Seve 17th in the book. You got Faldo at 22nd. Is Rory now in front of both of them?
He's in front of Faldo. He's not in front of Seve. Okay, he's at number 20. And we'll see what happens in the British Open in a few weeks. I haven't done the numbers to see where he goes from there. But that's a question a lot of people have asked. Yeah, he's risen up. And I've tried to figure out how high can he go. He's 36 years old now. What would he have to do to enter the top 10? Still quite a bit. I'm not sure he's going to get there.
The other part of this book is that I think Johnny McDermott is the perfect example to start the book of showing the totality of the way you wanted to examine this, is that, yes, it's challenging to compare eras, but you only play against who you play against, and you created this template for how you were going to do it, which puts certain players like Harry Vardon maybe higher up than other people because they want to separate the modern era from kind of the infancy of professional golf. I like that, Michael. Again, I think you can do it every way. You can focus on the modern era. You can talk about players like J.H. Taylor and Harry Vardon and Ted Ray and Willie Anderson and guys like that as well. Vardon gets shine in your book because you did it the way that you did it. Are you proud of that aspect?
I'm totally proud of it. I think Vardon is perhaps the most overlooked great player in the history of the game. The 6 British Opens, coming to America in 1900 and going on a tour and really, in many ways, bringing the game to this is even before Francis Ouimet. And then, of course, his role in the 13 Open versus Francis Ouimet. And in 1920, the U.S. Open, at age 50, he has a great chance to win it, stumbles down the end. But the influence of Harry Vardon, beyond just the sheer genius of his playing ability, plus coming back from tuberculosis, plus dealing with the yips, an extraordinary accomplishment on and off the golf course. A lot of people have interviewed me, amazingly enough, know so little about Vardon, but he is a giant in this game. Yeah, he is. The other thing that I always think is a good conversation is talking about what's harder to do. And again, I don't think that there is a definitive answer as one being harder than the other. Winning stroke play events compared to match play events. You have Bobby Jones third on your list. You have him ahead of Hogan. And if you look at the lion's share of the major championships that he won, he beat opponents. He clipped them off one at a time. Now, the vagaries of winning 18-hole matches, some people, Michael, as you know, will say, that's harder to do as opposed to taking on a field. You meander through a stroke play, medal play event, and at the end, you beat the field. What do you think is harder to do? Oh, no, I definitely think the match play is harder to do. Absolutely. I think, Gary, I gave serious thought when I calculated all the bonus points and so on. I gave serious thought to the fact that maybe the GOAT is not Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods, that it's Bobby Jones. He wins 13 of the last 21 majors he plays. He retires, as you know, at the age of 28, wins the Grand Slam in 1930, and by the way, did all this while having a day job. And the influence he had in the game, Augusta National, the role of the amateur, all sorts of things. Yeah, Jones went over Hogan, but he did not go over the last two players. But I can see the case to make for him being the greatest player of all time.
You know, Michael, one thing that I believe is the intangibles that I think border on tangible. Jones was, and with all due respect to Francis Ouimet, who I think, you know, look, you have him in a lofty position. I think you have him 20th on the list. And most people think, well, they focus on 1913. I get that, but he won amateur, he won U.S. amateurs as well. Jones, what he was carrying, he was golf's first superstar in this country. He lit the match on, if you look at the golden age of architecture, and then what came after him in terms of the creation of a professional golf. And I know it was modest in the 30s into the 40s, but it was coming. That his importance to golf in America, you could help make the argument that he is the most important / greatest for that reason. The weight loss, it was not because he was maniacal. He was carrying something beyond just trying to beat the next opponent the next day. He was Babe Ruth.
Plus, he embodied those virtues that we admire so much about this game, the gentleman aspect of it, the paying attention to sportsmanship, all these wonderful qualities which we cherish about golf. Sometimes players don't live up to those standards, but when they don't, we notice it. And Jones just summarized everything we love about this game. And yes, he had the 2 ticker tape parades down Broadway. So many people were influenced by him. So many players on this list got into the sport because of Bobby Jones. And I think, yes, Arnold, yes, Tiger, there's players who've had tremendous influence. But again, I don't know if anyone has affected the stature and progress of this game as much as Bobby Jones.
The majors thing, I want to go back to what you said about that players, and there is no argument, are weighted and they're evaluated based on the performance in those events, particularly how many they won. Brooks Koepka has one of the most unusual resumes of any player historically. It's not even close in terms of his major championship haul compared to the balance of his resume, in which you have him 43rd in the book, and you have guys like Leo Deagle, Gene Littler, and I can keep going on and on and on of guys who have a lot less major championships, and yet they're ahead of him on the list. Was that challenging because he doesn't have the production outside of those events?
It is challenging, but I had to remind myself over and over that I had to stick by the rules I came up with, by the numbers I came up with. Even if they might yield results that surprised me, I couldn't say, well, that's not what I think, so therefore I'm going to juggle the numbers a little bit. No, you're right. Koepka has these 5 major victories, and we don't think much else beyond that, right? But Gene Littler, you brought up Gene Littler, and what an amazing player he was. Another overlooked player who, and the other thing that's interesting to me, Gary, about so many of these players, as great as they were, they didn't fulfill the expectations that we had of them. And that's a whole other debate. Is it fair to judge a player's performance by the expectations we, the media, have? But Gene Littler was going to be the next Hogan. I mean, he was on path to greatness. He only won 1 professional major, but he won a lot of tournaments, and that's why his numbers in the end were higher than Koepka's.
But you know, to what you just said about the expectations of the media, in large measure, as you know, having covered the sport, expectations of the media, and the media is the conduit to the fan. A lot of what we understand is from the voices of the peer group. So, for example, Fred Couples, Davis Love III. Similarly, Michael, with respect to expectations, it's not just our expectation. You know, those conversations in locker rooms during those various generations are fueled, and the stories written and the narrative of those players in large measure is built on the expectation of the ones that they compete against, saying he should have won more. Don't you think that applies to Freddie and Davis?
Oh, gosh, yes, absolutely. It is one of the most unbelievable stats in history that combined, Freddie and Davis only won 2 majors. If you had told me that was in 1987 or 88, pick a year around then when they're both at that age of their lives, that the over under that it would wind up with only 2, I would have gone to some place and figure out where can I put money on the over. They were that talented. But golf is, as you know, I mean, not only do you have to beat the opponent and the golf course, you have to conquer yourselves. You have to conquer the demons within yourself. And that comes up in so many of these players.
The book again, The Golf 100, a spirited ranking of the greatest players of all time. The author, Michael Arkush, joining us here on this Five Clubs conversation. Greg Norman. Similarly, Michael, I think Greg is in that category of the what ifs, what could have been. You can focus on 1986 exclusively in terms of the Saturday Slam and what could have been. And some of it you can say was self-inflicted. There's no argument that it is. What do you think his number probably should have been had he done all the things? Would he have been a top 20 player all time?
I think so, yes. Yeah, I mean, think about it. 14 times he had on Sunday a share of the lead or better in a major championship, and he won only 2 of them. Let's say he wins half of those 14. Okay, that's 5 more majors for a total of 7. Absolutely, I think he would have been, if not, it would have been top 20, maybe even close to top 15. Probably, and again, you said I think a lot more of this was self-inflicted than perceptions have been in the past. We've always said Larry Mize and Bob Tway and poor Greg Norman, he's a victim of fate, and to some degree it's true, but he also made the wrong decisions at the wrong time, and that really cost him a lot.
Generations. I'm an enormous admirer and fan of the 70s in men's golf. I call kind of that decade kind of the Rough Riders. You start putting together a list of players who were either in prime like Jack. For Arnold, obviously, it was Twilight. His last win on the tour came in 1973. But then you start looking at the Ray Floyds and the beginning of the careers of Crenshaw and Kite. And obviously Dave Stockton is winning majors and Trevino. I think that the density, Michael, of truly great players in that decade. But then people are going to say, well, the reason why they piled up all the tour wins and all the majors is because it was basically 12 Rough Riders, and then the balance of it was less than today's generation where there's more. How do you kind of come down on that when you start looking at decades?
Oh, I agree with you 1,000%. There has been no era in golf like the 70s. I mean, you mentioned a few of them. Let's go Irwin, Crenshaw, Weiskopf, Hubert Green,
Yes.
Gary. I mean, we could have the whole show
Johnny Miller.
just on all the great players of the 70s. Yes, you can say that there are people deep in the field who could have won, but a major or two. But still, they had to battle each other. They had to go against great players in every single major. I don't think there's any question that that's the era. And people say, well, the fields are deeper now. Yeah, but the amount of players really at the top is much less than it was back then.
Yeah, I'm like you. I lean on that particular decade, and you start thinking about other players as well. Whether it was just the beginning, it's still in that decade. Seve, certainly he announced himself in that Open Championship that Miller won in 1976. He won on the PGA Tour for the first time in 1978. Lanny Wadkins. Here's an area where it's not about struggling. It's just interesting to me. You have Lanny Wadkins 56th. And again, you have these certain metrics that you use to compile how they got to where they got. He won 1 major in 1977, the PGA at Pebble Beach. And then I look at guys behind him who have 3 times the major wins, guys like Nick Price and Hale Irwin and Payne Stewart, who, again, however much more Payne was going to win after 1999 when he was gone in October of that year. Did you struggle with that for any particular reason? Because, again, Lanny was great, but like Price and Irwin and Stewart, they all of those guys won 3 majors.
Yeah, no question. Again, But Lanny was in the hunt in so many other majors.
Yep.
And the putting problems he addresses, he talks about, yeah, if he had straightened that out, he would have won a lot more. There's no question that I had to reconcile with myself with the fact that, yes, there are going to be players with more major victories who are lower on the list. But they didn't, Hale didn't really come close to winning other majors. Nick Price didn't really have that many other top finishes in the majors, not quite the same amount as Lanny did. And Lanny won a lot of regular tour events. But Lanny's another player you would have thought would have been even better on the list, given the way he started his career, the promise he had. A great player nonetheless.
Yeah, so Lanny, he had 4 seconds, and Payne Stewart won 3. He also had 4 seconds. He had 12. He had 10 top 5s. Nick Price had 12 top 5s in the 3 majors. Yeah, it's interesting, but Lanny's number is because of his production winning all these other tour events.
Correct.
He's got more than all those other guys.
Yes.
I would argue, though, again, if people said who's better, Nick Price or Lanny Wadkins, I think the reflex answer is going to be Nick Price. But again, that's part of the fun of doing this. I tell you something else that I think will surprise people is where you have Arnold Palmer. You have him 5th. Most people historically do not have Arnold Palmer in the top 5. And again, he has production, but there's another element that you spoke of. It was how he lost. Explain to people the influence of the hard losses for Palmer that has a part in why he's in your top 5.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive and strange to say this, but the way in which he lost, to me, brought out a certain other kind of greatness, a greatness of effort, a greatness of caring, a greatness that applies to all of us in our lives. I don't think I've ever seen anyone want to win more badly than Arnold Palmer. And the way he went about that was so inspiring. And also, I think his fans obviously loved him, and in many cases loved him more when he lost because of that quality. And that's a part of golf, and that's a part of life as well. And the reason he's number 5 is because I say in the book, he reminds me of George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. Where would we be in this sport without Arnold Palmer? I mean, Doug Ford, Billy Casper, players like that, they would not have brought us to this. They would not have been the bridge to the next era. And then without Arnold being who he was, would Jack have had the same impact? Would Trevino, would Player, all these other guys? Indispensable. There's no question about it.
Phil's ranking is, I don't think that anybody would look at it and go too high, too low. I think most people kind of have him there. Here is my argument as to why you could argue a little bit closer to the top, and it's nuanced, but hear me through on this. You have him 13th. I think about, like, for a player of like Phil Mickelson, you are so talented, and literally 5 years later, somebody comes along who's not just better than you at basically everything. He's not from Bangladesh. He's also from your state. And he's from your part of the state, okay? So, and of course, it's Tiger I'm talking about. And not only do you manage to allow yourself to not be defeated by the presence of this person who is from Southern California, you go on yourself to win 45 times on the PGA Tour. He gets a big head start in major championships. You don't win your first until you're after the age of 30. You manage to win 6. You do something that's not likely to be done by the other guy, and that is win a major after 50. And you win a major that most people thought you never could because you had no record in it after taking one of the hardest losses imaginable, which was the 2013 U.S. Open, and you pick yourself up off the mat to win the Open Championship a month later. I think Phil Michael, historically, is going to be underrated, and I think the live part is why people will maybe disparage him even more. I think what he managed to do with Tiger being in that vortex makes him historically underrated.
Do you think he's a top 10 player?
I think he's right on the cusp. And I think, again, this guy was in the riptide of Tiger, and he won 45 times in an era where guys are going to make $100, $200 million, and where's the motivation to win 20? 45 is an extraordinary haul where more guys are capable of winning. He's got the oldest major championship win. He's got the 6 seconds in the one that eluded him, and he kept, again, trying. Yeah, I do. I think he's 11th, maybe 10th.
I think your argument's great, but I just can't imagine him being better than Gary Player or Tom Watson. Okay, right off the bat there. So both of whom have more major victories than him. And the other thing with Phil is there were a lot of opportunities, especially when Tiger was retooling his swing, where Phil didn't take advantage of that and win those majors. And also the ones, the self-inflicted ones like Norman. You can talk about obviously Winged Foot being the prime example of that in 06. Phil Mickelson is an amazing player. Not only when you do the numbers, but I think of the lost opportunities, I can't see him being higher than 13.
Yeah, Michael, if the application of Palmer's losses and somehow giving him credit for the manner in which he lost, again, I go back to Marion. There are some amazing wins off of taking one right to the kisser. And whether it's Bernhard Langer missing a short putt and the next week being in Stuttgart and winning a golf tournament after Kiowa, that's a different category. Phil went to the Open and won that after what happened at Marion. I mean, come on. And 2006 Winged Foot, okay, he won the Masters again. And one thing I would say about the Tiger retooling, who did take advantage, Phil took advantage of it because that was 2004, 2005. Post-Butch, pre-getting locked in with Hank Haney is when Phil took off. So I would argue that he did take advantage of Tiger being in that space.
I was referring to the earlier swing changes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I see your point. Again, though, I think that there are too many instances where Phil was in the moment and had that opportunity and couldn't cash in. I think that hurt him a lot. But I think the resiliency he showed and coming back, his career is a lot different with those 6 majors than it would have been with the 4 if he hadn't won the British Open, if he hadn't won the PGA at Kiowa. So still, I can't see him being better than Tom Watson or Gary Player.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, you have Mickey Wright in your top 10, and let's get to that because, one, you made the choice to include them. Competition's different. It's not only competing against different players, it's different conditions, length of guide. It's different. And I get it, and I appreciate the fact that you chose to do it. And she is, to me, I'm with you. I think that Mickey Wright is the greatest player, greatest female player of all time. But there are a lot of people, younger maybe, who'd say, come on, man, Annika's better. Explain to people why it was Mickey Wright over Annika.
Yeah, a lot of people have said to me Annika was better, number one. Number two, I've had 2 different people interview me and say, I'm not kidding you, Gary. Mickey Wright, I looked him up. I couldn't find him anywhere. Seriously. I didn't know. I can't remember what my response was to that. I think I just stared for a minute. But look at Mickey Wright, the 13 majors, the 82 victories, pretty much walking away from, scaling back from the game at the age of 34. The swing, that golf swing, which nobody's had a better golf swing than that. Even Hogan said so. Injuries she battled with. Annika's tremendous, no question about it. But no woman has compared to Mickey Wright as a player. I just can't see it.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And again, it's part of, you got to be pragmatic about the way that you read this book, review these numbers, because again, you made the choice to put men and women together in a categorized way. And I think the way that it's explained, you just, again, be pragmatic about talking about it. A couple guys who I think deserve some attention. And with respect to Bobby Locke, I think there are some people who would say because he was, you could say, treated, you could say blackballed, you can say his own choice to not pursue more golf in the United States after coming here and making it abundantly clear that he was as good as anybody? Explain the case. I think you have him at 32 on your list. I think some people would argue he could be higher. I know Gary Player would make that argument.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of take us through the whole Bobby Locke examination.
He comes over in 1947. He wins a lot. He's a tremendous. I think he finished second on the money list that year, starting late to Jimmy DeMerit. But he reneges in the way that it was looked at for not committing, takes out of the commitment to 2 tournaments, and a lot of people felt that, and therefore he's barred from the PGA Tour. So a lot of people felt that it wasn't a matter of the tournaments; it was a matter that he was too good, and they weren't crazy about the South African coming over here and taking and just being better than these Americans, and that upset Locke. Why wouldn't it upset him? So he limited his appearances in the United States after that period. So I'm just saying that if he had free reign, if he had stayed in America, if he had played a lot more here, I think there's no question he would have added to those totals. His record was incredible. No, you can't. It'd be hard to find somebody who ever was a better putter than Bobby Locke. So yeah, I can see the point where people would say higher than 32, but I still went with numbers, and I couldn't give him too many bonus points for that. So that's where he wound up.
All right, let's focus in on the top 5. I mentioned Palmer being your 5th, and I get it. I think that there are, again, he's got 7 majors, close calls. The number of tour events he won, the PGA Tour clearly, as much as Gary Player has 9 majors, he's globetrotting. He won tournaments all over the world. He wasn't facing the competition. So the weightiness of the number you give to tour events, in addition to some other aspects, has him at number 5. Hogan 4, Jones 3, Tiger 2. You make Jack 1. How do you describe what Tiger is in comparison to Jack, and how do you describe what Jack is compared to Tiger, making the choice? And again, you have data that's supporting the position you have them in. Jack is the greatest champion. That's how I say it, Michael, that Jack is the greatest champion the game has ever known. Tiger is the greatest player that I have ever seen. I saw Jack back in, I was a kid. Again, you try to have as much context as you can have. Jack 1, Tiger 2, explain it.
Well, let me just say one thing before that. I have Arnold with 8 majors because I am including the U.S. Amateur victory in 54. So that was an important part of the whole book for me. Was we have neglected the value of the amateur tournaments, of the role of the amateur period, and I wanted to, in my own way, restore. As far as Tiger versus Jack, again, I went strictly by the numbers. Jack has 20 majors, not 18. Okay, somehow, Gary, if you could tell me who took away those 2 majors somewhere in the 90s, I'd love to know who that person was. I've not been able to find that out.
Michael, I think it's one of the most interesting things because Venturi, Pat Summerall on the 86 broadcast of the Masters, they said it out loud. They said 20. There's a tree somewhere on the property at Oak Hill when he won the PGA Championship. And it literally says engraved on this tree, 19th major championship victory, because that was the one that preceded the 86 Masters. I think that documentary of when the 20 retreated into 18 is one of the most interesting things imaginable.
Absolutely. I mean, not only on the CBS broadcast, but read every major publication from 86 on. For years, it identified him as having 20 majors. Okay, so let's put that aside. The 19 seconds, the 9 thirds. As I write in the book, Tiger was on the path to being the greatest player of all time. He wins the Open at Torrey in 08, and it's everybody in the world was saying it wasn't a matter of if he's going to break Jack's record, it was when. I think some predictions were 2011, 12, 13, whatever. I remember those articles. It never happened. And you can't overlook that. It's the body of work. It's the totality. Tiger did not get there, as great as he was. And again, if you tell me Michael, you've got to put money on between Tiger and Jack and an 18-hole match for everything, I very well might pick Tiger. But that still doesn't mean that Tiger's totals overall eclipse Jack's. They don't.
Yeah, it's like you said, you're talking about, again, we were recently at the Memorial, and it's always fun to refresh your mind on certain things. I love when players of today look at just like a one-sheeter, and it has just the stuff that Jack did. They know the 18, and many of them know the 19, but they don't know the 56 top fives. They don't know the fact that the guy finished outside the top 10 once in the Open Championship over an 18-year stretch, and that was a 12th place finish. Or the fact that Michael and I, part of this matters to me. He played in every major from 1962 until the middle of 1998. And oh, by the way, in that Masters of 1998, at 58, he finished 6th. Like, that stuff to me is mind-blowing.
Now, you go back and watch the YouTube of that 98 Masters. I think there was a putt on 9 that he barely missed that I think would have put him 1 back. So I think that's the case. It's incredible what and again, and how much did he focus on the game from ages 40 through? What if he knew, okay, I know this guy Tiger Woods is coming up. I'm going to try to add on to that total as much as possible. Could he have gotten higher? I think he's talked about that he might have been able to. But again, you cannot overlook the numbers with Jack Nicklaus.
No, again, the Tiger part of, again, it could have been, I don't think that, if you look at their toolkit, most people would say Tiger had more weapons, but then I would go back to, the fact that Jack, to me, is the greatest driver of the golf ball. Like, everyone talks about other players. The introduction, Michael, of the total driving stat, which is devalued now, strokes gained, we're in that era. In 1980, it was introduced, and Jack won that category of total driving, which is a combination of accuracy and distance. He was 40 years old, and his number was 23. He was 13th in distance. He was 10th in accuracy for a number of 23. No player since then has ever touched the 20s, and only a couple have been in the 30s. The total driving leader today is usually in that 50, the combination of both. To be that good for that long with that club, to me, makes it the greatest weapon, I think, that the game has ever seen.
Absolutely. Let's also go back to what we talked about earlier. Jack had to beat Irwin, Weiskopf, Miller, Player. Let's look at how many incredible great players can we look at that Tiger faced consistently through his career? Ernie Els, Phil, VJ. It's much less than Jack faced.
Yeah, it's again. I think when you start to compare, and again, I know what the counter argument is. Well, they got more because there was less to beat. And so the reason why the Floyds and the Hubert Greens and all these guys had multiples, and some of them got to 3 or whatever, I don't know. I like you feel like I do about the 70s, and Jack owned the decade. He absolutely owned it. Let me ask you about some guys right now. We mentioned Scheffler. And I know you're still keeping a close eye in the way that the game is being played and performances. Who do you think in 10 years, if you revise this book, has a real good chance to be in your 100 beyond Scheffler?
Bryson.
Yep.
Xander. Rahm. I mean, a lot of this will depend on how the live battle unfolds. Yes. Let's see.
Let me just point out though that Dustin Johnson's in here. I mentioned Spieth. There are players that are still competing that are in your 100 already. I'm talking about guys who, like you just mentioned some, and I'm with you. I think in 10 years, Rahm's in this book. I think Xander is going to be in this book for sure. I think Bryson unequivocally is going to be in this book. I think Scheffler, to me, Michael, I think he has a chance. Like, we did this after he won the PGA. The last guy to have his odometer stop at 9, put Tiger and Jack in a separate category, was Player in 1978. The last to stop at 8 was Watson. That was 1983. The last to stop at 7 was Palmer in 1964. I think Scheffler, because of his ability to focus, the absence of distraction, and the fact that he is such a superior ball striker, I think it's not unreasonable to think that he's going to be the 5, 6, 7 range. Do you agree with that?
Oh, the 5, 6, 7 range of total majors? Absolutely, yeah. But you brought up Watson, which is a great example of somebody who is in his mid-30s and doesn't win a major after that. Who would have predicted that was going to happen, right?
Right.
So nothing in this game is given, as you know. So yeah, Scottie is on the path to get to that 5, 6, 7 major category, but too many variables, too many uncertainties to anoint him any further at this point.
I do want to ask you before we put a bow on this. The Jones thing, I totally get it, because the game, even though it was in its infancy, to have the weight of the world, to win 13 major championships, and even though the reconfiguration is totally different, the amateur was the guy. And match play, the vagaries of it, the challenges of 18-hole matches, to be the lone survivor at the end is also very provocative as well. Make the case for Hogan because of all that life dealt him, and that he started later in terms of when he won his first major. He won for the first time in 1940 on the tour, first major in 46, last in 53. The window was shorter, but because of the accident, he didn't even compete. He only went to the Open Championship once, and he got the scalp at Carnoustie in 53. Where some people could, whether it's Jones at 3 or 4, you could say, you put it all up there together. I could argue that he is, because of him looking at certain, bullseyes and hitting them, and then also being hit by a bus, literally, you could say he is the greatest achiever of all time.
That's a great way of putting it, Gary, and I can see that argument very easily. The question is, was Hogan a better player after the accident than before? Or a more focused player, a player who knew he couldn't play that much, but just prioritized the majors so much, it was so important to him. I can easily see how Hogan could go 3 and Jones 4. But I still can't get over the fact of what Jones did in that period and when Jones's influence on the game. Jones had more of an impact on the game than Ben Hogan did.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. All these players.
I will say one more thing. I will say that the 53 season, however, the 3 major victories, is the best season any golfer has ever had. Even better than Jones's Grand Slam, because nobody was stuck with the body.
Better than Tiger 2000? You think better than Tiger 2000?
Better than Tiger 2000, yep. Because nobody was stuck with the body that Hogan was stuck with at that point. And he played so sparingly, and to win 3 of those majors in that moment, he didn't play in the PGA. He couldn't play in the PGA. Was conflicted with the time of the Open in Carnoustie. And I can't imagine anyone ever having a better season than that.
Before I let you go, look, I think writing any books, and you've written 16 books. You've done this exercise in various sports, whether it's Sugar Ray Leonard or Scottie Pippen, and I can go on and on. You've examined lives and performances for athletes through time. What was the most rewarding part about doing this book for you?
Catching up with a lot of the players I had covered, people like Hale Irwin, talking to Raymond Floyd, talking to Lanny Wadkins, talking to the Crenshaw and Kite, and just trying to catch up with them in their 70s, in some cases older, just trying to figure out how they look back on their lives, how they look back on their setbacks, how they analyzed everything they have done, and I tried to gain some perspective, and to have that opportunity to talk to them, to catch up with them, was meant so much to me, and also why I was so devastated by the loss of Tom Weisskopf and Kathy Whitworth, because these players, they're the soul of the game, and for them to pass away at that point just was heartbreaking to me. I just have so invested in my life in caring about this game and caring about these players. To have that opportunity meant everything to me, Gary.
Well, Michael, it shows in the writing because, like I said, being on planes the last couple weeks and having this book with me and learning things that I wasn't aware of about a good number of these players. This is the kind of book that spawns debate, which is always fun. Again, the idea is to be pragmatic about the way you examine the careers. The fact that you used a quantitative baseline to help build the arguments for each player and their placement in the list. But most importantly, is learning about these players and the stories that you share, starting with Johnny McDermott at an advancing age, in twilight in life in 1971, being at a U.S. Open, and someone like Arnold Palmer, who is John Wayne in golf at that time, putting his arm around him and making him his guest. That's the warmth that this book gives. It's not just about, hey, he won this, and this is the bottom line. No, it's about drawing color and giving context to the lives of people who've made this lonely pursuit of trying to play this game at an elite level.
Thank you very much. And I want to say it's just so important for people to remember the game didn't start with Arnold Palmer. It didn't start with Tiger Woods. All these players paved the way for now. Let's recognize them. Let's honor them for the greatness that they showed.
And you did just that. Thank you. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for taking the time. And again, the Golf 100, it's available everywhere. I promise you that if you are getting ready to sit down in a beach chair and you want to learn more about the great players over the history of this great game, it starts with number 100 with Johnny McDermott all the way to number 1, Jack Nicklaus. Michael, thank you again.
Thank you, Gary.
Well, thank you again to Michael Arkush, the author of the Golf 100. This list is going to change. Who knows? Scottie Scheffler, he's not even in this book. He's in the book now, but what's his number? It goes on, and that's the beauty of it. We appreciate him taking the time to speak on the book that he wrote, but most importantly, thank you to you for taking the time to listen and watch this Five Clubs conversation. We'll see you next time.